In the Heat of the Sun originally released in 1994, and has since solidified its reputation as a unique experience in the way it carefully approaches and reinterprets its source material. I first watched it last fall in a college classroom, and I must say it really changed and influenced the way I see film. Now, In the Heat of the Sun is based off of the 1991 novella Wild Beast by Wang Shou, and the film presents a coming-of-age tale in an unlikely era, taking elements of absurdity and realism to craft a compelling cornucopia of visual and auditory intrigue for viewers. Now, the story focuses on Ma Xiaojun, a conflicted and misguided youth growing up in the streets of Beijing during the height of the Cultural Revolution. Xiaojun is headstrong, though deep down his confidence fluctuates and he often fantasizes about himself as a more courageous and daring person than in reality. His father is rarely present due to an ongoing war, and his mother screams and berates him constantly for his mischievous behavior. Without proper parental guidance or affection, Xiaojun spends his days with a gang of kids he grew up with. With these band of friends, he receives the camaraderie that's been absent in every other facet of his youth. This is a world where no one is safe, intellectualism and ownership is punishable by humiliation and death, and the youth are largely free to roam the desolate streets of Beijing, wreaking havoc if they so desire. To Xiaojun, this spells paradise. He spends the summers breaking and entering, engaging in gang conflicts, and trying to talk to girls. Overall, this perceived sentiment is what coats the film in an air of nostalgia, leaving a fondness for an age that was otherwise recognized for its hardship among the populace. In many ways, Xiaojun's memories represent the structure of the film itself. At points, story-centric details change and fantastical events occur. For instance, at Xiaojun and Liu Yiku's birthday party, an entire scenario of infighting between the friends occurs before the film stops, and Xiaojun confesses that his imagination has gotten a bit carried away. Afterwards, a more realistic memory plays out, which results in a civilized exchange at the same restaurant. What this visual compensation provides is a connection between what the audience is viewing and Xiaojun's warped memories. It allows the film to almost seem like a direct visual translation of his thoughts and reflections, which are fluid and alive. At any moment they could shift, change perspective, or disappear entirely. This in turn emphasizes Ma Xiaojun's role as an unreliable narrator, which encourages the audience to ponder questions about the complex relationship between memory and reality. Now, as the narrative progresses, Xiaojun meets Milan, a girl he grows absolutely infatuated with. The compositional shots and framing help to emphasize this mounting excitement, from the single picture of Milan on the wall to the shots of her lower thighs and feet from beneath the bed. As the camera eventually shows Milan in person, Xiaojun's fantasies clash with his reality and he desperately tries to get to know her, eventually succeeding. Ningjing does a terrific job of emphasizing the confident but playful role of Milan, who soon becomes a regular in Xiaojun's friend group. And from here, much of the film's nostalgic elements take hold. Days at the swimming pool, celebrating birthday parties, and carefree banter are just a few activities that adorn the ragged edges of the Cultural Revolution with blossoming memories of Xiaojun's youth. In the Heat of the Sun does not attempt to rewrite history. Rather, it demonstrates a method of reinterpreting it on a personal, dreamlike level, not directly linked to concrete historical fact. This way, the movie can fluidly move through various sequences, exploring different themes and emotions in a single frame of nostalgia. However, it's undeniable that many might find the protagonist Xiaojun himself to be unlikable, despite the film being told from his point of view. And I really can't disagree personally. Ma Xiaojun is in many ways the reprehensible anti-hero of In the Heat of the Sun. As I mentioned previously, he breaks into people's houses for fun, promotes gang violence on the streets of Beijing, disrespects his elders, and even attempts to molest a girl out of jealousy and malice. By all accounts, he is absolutely awful. He's also a coward who tries to imagine himself as better than he actually is, and romanticizes a time in history predominantly known for mass human suffering. For these reasons, among others, many will find In the Heat of the Sun a difficult watch since they will not identify or sympathize with Xiaojun and his baffling motivations. However, this movie succeeds in developing a narrative that the viewer can relate to despite the protagonist. Like millions around the world, the youth of Beijing have struggled with love, friendship, trust, and growing up in a changing generation. What In the Heat of the Sun does is relay the tale of China's youth during the Cultural Revolution to a level that is accessible to most that have had similar conflicts in their lives. In turn, this helps international audiences relate to many of the themes of the film on a familiar level, such as making friends, difficulty with parenting, and first love. And in many ways, Xiaojun as a character is the antithesis to that relatability. He is unpredictable, and from there an unstable element begins to weave its way into an otherwise consistent narrative. This adds a level of intrigue for the audience. They relate to much of the struggles of the youth, but are curious as to how Xiaojun became an unfortunate product of his upbringing and how it leads to his demoralizing conclusion. Over the course of the movie, we see Xiaojun's best friend, a key member of his gang, Liu Yiku, become more and more attracted to Milan, and soon she begins to show feelings for him as well. Now, Xiaojun, riddled with anger and jealousy at Milan's attraction to his best friend instead of him, drags out his deepest, darkest urge. Accompanied by erratic camera movements that circumvent his muddled thoughts, Xiaojun attempts to assault Milan. And this is a horrible reality that this movie is not afraid to show. In the Heat of the Sun explores sexuality in many different facets, from sexual discovery and prudish behavior to outright sexual assault and gratuitous violence against women. What Xiaojun does is irredeemable, and though he never sees corporate punishment in the film, Milan and his friends push him away afterwards, now aware of the monster lurking inside of him. This all culminates to a sequence of Xiaojun getting kicked repeatedly as he reaches out to his friends for help, and is a direct reaction to the events of the previous scene, but is told in a dreamlike way. Xiaojun completely lacks a moral compass, thinking things could go back to the way they were, when in reality he single-handedly is responsible for shattering the peace and destroying his friendships. He is rejected by his former gang, and as he gives up and lays in the pool, the dream finally ends and with it the movie. The only sequence that seems to partially undermine this idea, in my opinion, is the event during the credits, which depicts an older Xiaojun reuniting with his friends excitedly. This scene was not strictly necessary to the movie's overall messaging. I personally think it muddles it a little bit, though it may imply Xiaojun redeemed himself in the eyes of his friends at some point between the pool sequence and the credits, but I suppose we'll never know. The reality is that this ending is up to the audience to decide, which does reflect the same visual inconsistency that the rest of the film intentionally harbors. Xiaojun's memories during his childhood are depicted in a warm light that brings the illusion of balance, safety, and happiness into his perceived existence in the youthful playground of Beijing. However, going back to the sequence at the end, he and his friends as adults are rendered in black and white, which emphasizes the extent to which Xiaojun romanticizes the past versus the present and future. To him, his youth was an unattainable time of personal happiness, and in many ways he never moved on from those moments. He never grew up, and will never know if he ever learned his lesson. In the Heat of the Sun is a great film. It demonstrates directorial skill at blurring the line between perceived memory and historical fiction under the guise of a controversial narrator. This film reaffirms the pursuit of creativity to tell interesting narratives and provoke questions about the nature of youth and learning to live during difficult eras without proper notion or guidance. Zhang Wen, the director, employs a creative approach to the organic storytelling, and the actors' performances respectively enhance the movie's engagement and messaging, along with the music and the cinematography, which helps to add a sense of immersion to the overall experience. It might not be for everyone, but in my opinion, In the Heat of the Sun is an extremely memorable and influential film that handles complicated subject matter with a grace and continuity that is so evident of great storytelling. But those are my thoughts on this movie. I'm curious, how do you feel about unreliable narrators, and what are some great examples of stories that employ them as protagonists? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. But anyway, as always, thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.